Hey gardeners, and welcome to my small garden. Today I'm going to show you how to plan a square foot garden with which you'll be able to grow your vegetables in less space and with a fraction of work needed. And we're going to be doing that by planning my garden for the 2021 season. Because the time to plan your garden is now, when the season is at its end, but the garden is still full of vegetables. That way you'll be able to still see where something did grow best and what needs to be fixed in our planning. But don't worry, if this is your first year gardening and with that your first garden plan, I will show you every step I take and every tip I follow to plan my small square foot garden. That's why I'm sure that in the end, every one of you will be able to plan your garden for the upcoming season. So without further ado, let's plan our garden in the main content. The first thing we need to do is to figure out and plan how much space and how many square foot boxes we will need to grow all the vegetables we want. This can be difficult for a beginner, but I have few guidelines for you. First, you need to figure out how much space of your garden you can dedicate to your kitchen garden. This number won't represent how much space you will dedicate in the end, it's just a guideline. Here you can see that in my small garden I can dedicate an area of 270 square feet to my garden, split into sections. This area will also include some pathways beside my raised beds. Okay, that is your maximum, but how much do you really need? It will all depend on how much you want to eat your vegetables and how many of them you want to preserve to eat throughout the winter. If you want to have a fresh dinner salad every day, you will need to dedicate at least one 4x4 square foot gardening box per adult. And because in my situation I want to feed 2 adults, I will draw 2 square foot boxes. But if you'd like to have some supper vegetables beside your salads, you will need to plan 2 4x4 raised beds per person. So we'll draw another 2 raised beds. Don't you worry where you draw them, because those are just rough planning sketches and won't reflect the final position of the raised beds. And if you want to grow so much that you will be able to store some vegetables for the winter, go with 3 or more raised beds per adult. And because I'm in this category, I will draw another 2 raised beds. Just to mention, if you have any kids in your family, add the same amount of raised beds as you would per adult, but change the size to a 3x3 raised bed. My tip here would be to start small. My first year I had 6 4x4 raised beds, but it was too much. Most of the time at least one raised bed was empty, plus I had too many zucchinis that were taking most of the space. So start small, 1 or 2 raised beds per adult. Your first year should be plenty. Said that, now that you know how much you can dedicate and how much you need, you can see if your desires can fit in your space that you have. Luckily for me, I have plenty of space to put all 6 raised beds in the desired space. Plus I have some leftovers for some pets, raised beds for flowers, and additional vegetables that will be sacrificed to Mother Nature. Yes, it's a nature tax you must pay. The next step, now that you have decided how many square feet of growing space you will dedicate to your garden, is to grab a list of all the vegetables that are out there. It doesn't need to be a specific list with all the varieties, but a general selection of vegetables or things you can grow in your garden. A good list can be found on Wikipedia. Just search in Google "list of vegetables" wiki and you will find it. I, on the other hand, went into my square foot gardening book, link will be in the description, and there is a convenient list of vegetables at the end. Now that you have the list in front of you, transcribe the names of the vegetables on a piece of paper, and while you're doing this, try to think which one you will certainly plant and mark them with a plus sign in front of them, and which one you are certain you won't plant and mark them with a minus sign in front of them. If you're doing this for the first time, try to think what vegetables are you normally using in the kitchen And if this is not your first year, think what vegetables you had success with and which you know you can't grow in your climate. Also take into consideration that if you want to have a low maintenance garden, select vegetables that will put fruits, like cucumbers and zucchini, and minimize the vegetables that are eaten whole, like radishes and lettuce, because they need less planning, replanting and general care. You can see that I crossed many common vegetables that I am sure I won't grow, like garlic or spinach, but because in my family we don't eat them, it's pointless for me to waste space in my small garden for them. Once the list is completed, you can add the square foot gardening spacing for each plant. You can also find this information in the square foot gardening book, or you can watch my video on square foot gardening spacing that will pin in the top right corner. And at the end, you should have a list of vegetables that you will, you may, and you won't plant, with the square foot gardening spacing beside them, and you will be ready to take the next step. Now that you have this list, it's time to add how many of each plant you want to grow. Here I will recommend you to start with the biggest plants and continue in a descending order. You probably know the story of filling a jar, first with the large stones and then at the end with the sand, and not vice versa, right? And while you're writing how much space you will dedicate for each plant, try to always check the limit on how much space you actually have, so you don't cross it. Unfortunately here, I can't give you many more tips other than this, because it all depends on how much you like and need a specific plant. Some of you will dedicate more growing space to salad greens, some of you more to peppers and tomatoes, and some of you will dedicate more to herbs and flowers. For my garden, I will have the numbers almost the same as last year, and you can see them on the screen, just to give you a rough estimate on how much a family of two can eat. And make into consideration that I can most of my tomatoes, peppers and eggplants by making some delicious sauces with them. Before we jump into the next tip, let me know if you find this video helpful by leaving a like. It will help me a lot by letting YouTube know that it's good. And while you're down there, don't hesitate to leave a question in the comments. I read and answer all of them. So, you have the list of all the vegetables you want to plant, and you have sketched all the raised beds that you would like to have. And now what? Now it's time to group together all the vegetables that fall under a specific category. Those categories can be based on what add-ons your plants will need, like tomatoes, cucumbers and pole beans, that will need some supporting trellises. So it's best to group them together and place them on the north side of a raised bed. That way they won't shade your other plants. For me it's simple. I have two dedicated spaces in my garden for trellising, so I'll put all the tall vegetables there. Another category can be based on the protection that your plants need, like Brassica family, that needs to be protected from the cabbage butterfly and its caterpillar. I have two dedicated raised beds that will be covered throughout the growing season with some netting, so I'll place my Brassica there. Next are the plants that will be planted before my last frost date and will be covered with some fleece. And to easily do that, I will group them together. So lettuce, bush beans and peas will be together next year. Plants that need deeper soil mixes, like carrots and onions, will also be planted together. Plants like zucchini that needs a lot of space will be planted in the corners of my raised beds, and all it's left will be scattered in the remaining 3 places. Grouping your plants like this will minimize the problems you can have later on. Now you know how to plan your garden, but this is just the first step in your journey. Follow me by subscribing to see my upcoming video. We'll be talking how you make a beautiful layout for your garden and what you must avoid. I hope you find this video informative, and if you did, please remember to leave a like and comment with any questions you may have. Happy gardening!